Hello, this is a recap, analysis, and discussion of the season 6 finale of Game of Thrones, easily one of the best episodes of the series so far. The episode begins with the trial of Loras Tyrell, in which he basically gives the High Sparrow everything he wants. Loras confesses to fornication with Renly, to perjury. He swears to give up his name, give up his lordship, his inheritance of Highgarden, and commit his life to serving the Seven. The Faith Militant carve the seven pointed star into his forehead, which surprises and infuriates his sister, who was under the impression that if they did everything the High Sparrow wanted, her brother would not be mutilated in any way. The High Sparrow responded he had simply promised that after Cersei's trial, Loras was free to go, and that was still true. You get the impression that in the same way Marjorie had been playing him, he had not been completely manipulated by her. He was playing her a bit back as well. Meanwhile, Grand Maester Pycelle has been led by false pretenses to Clybourne's workshop under the impression that he's going to be meeting with the king. Instead, Clybourne has him cornered and stabbed to death by a bunch of Clybourne's little birds. Clybourne says something about making space by clearing out the old to bring in the new. I'm assuming this refers to him becoming the new Grand Maester. I have always thought Grand Maester Pycelle was quite loyal to Cersei, so Cersei must be about to do something so bad that even Pycelle cannot be part of it or be trusted to be part of it. And that thing she does next is, of course, what everyone was suspecting. She blows up the Sept with wildfire. There had been rumors of caches of wildfire in key parts of the city that she had Clybourne and his little birds investigate. She has no intention whatsoever of attending her trial, and she makes sure the Mountain Gregor Clegane prevents her son from attending as well. And she carries out her plan to ignite wildfire. There is a lot of ignite wildfire under the Sept. There is a lot of suspenseful build-up at first. When she fails to show up, the High Sparrow sends her cousin Lancel Lannister to go find her. He sees on the street a young boy disappearing into a tunnel, and he decides to follow. There he discovers the cache of wildfire. He can't quite see what's going on, and he's stabbed before he even notices that candles have been lit in the wildfire, and once they go out they will ignite everything. And he desperately tries to crawl to them and blow them out, but he is unfortunately too late, and everything goes up in flames. Before this happens, Marjorie Tyrell has, I guess, one final moment of strength. She seems to be the only one who notices something is wrong with the fact that neither Cersei nor Tommen are there. The facade, the games of pretending to be this pious person completely falls away, and she speaks forcefully to the High Sparrow. I think he's a bit shocked. She says something like, "Forget the bloody gods and listen to what I'm saying," and tries to encourage everyone to leave. But for some reason, the Faith Militant tried to prevent her, it seemed like her and her family in particular, from leaving. I really had trouble understanding what was going on with the High Sparrow during this part. Was he just so adamant to insist he was still in control? Was he so shocked by her behavior that he was just trying to impose his will on them? I don't know, but whatever happens, they can't get out in time, and in one fell swoop, Cersei is able to kill Marjorie Tyrell, Mace Tyrell, Loras Tyrell, the High Sparrow, her enemy, and his faith militant, and even, unfortunately, her own uncle Kevin and her cousin Lancel. And she just watches from the palace and drinks wine. She then goes on to torture the septa that tortured her when she was imprisoned in the sept, insisting she confess. This is the same woman who rang the bell during Cersei's walk of shame. Cersei promised this woman that she would be the last face she saw, and she's making good on this promise. And ironically, she confesses to everything here: the incest, the fact that her children are bastards born of incest, the fact that she killed the last king, and she even confesses that confessing feels quite good under the right circumstances. She also has Gregor Clegane come in and torture the poor woman. She will not let this woman have a quick death. Meanwhile, her son has learned and has seen what happened at the Sept and that Marjorie is dead, and he very calmly removes his crown, puts it aside, and then steps on the window and falls out, allows himself to fall to his death. This was a shock to me. I had really believed that even though he had been an ineffectual king, he had grown up a bit, or quite a lot, since he got married. You remember the naive young boy who honestly couldn't understand that his wife and his mother didn't get along and were just pretending to be warm to each other. Um, the thing that told me he had really grown up was actually at Marcella's funeral, when he says to Jamie, after he's learned that Trystane is dead, that his mother had probably done it. She hadn't, but it showed that he had finally come to see what kind of person she was and just what she was capable of. At first, during those silent moments when he had first learned of what had happened to Marjorie and at the Sept, I honestly thought for a few brief seconds that he might be the Valonqar that was prophesied to kill Cersei, the younger brother. He's his sibling's younger brother. I thought I never saw him throwing himself to his death. I honestly thought his response would be to calmly put down the crown and go strangle his mother. In the end, it did not happen. And after thinking about it a while, I guess it kind of made sense. What he did was a little more understandable. I should say, he was just defeated. I mean, look at him. He his beloved wife refuses to be intimate with him. He is the puppet of the High Sparrow, who is forcing him to put his own mother on trial. His life was utterly defeated, and now his beloved wife is gone, and his mother had just done this terrible, terrible thing. He had grown up a bit. Marcella had grown up a bit. Both of them, you realize it just before their short lives come to an end. Now, other things going on in the episode, we see that um, um, Sam and Gilly have finally reached the Citadel, where he is going to learn to become a maester once some paperwork is sorted out, and he finally gets to see that grand library that he's spoken about with such admiration numerous times. We also have a segue to Melisandre, who is finally confronted about Shireen by an emotional Davos, who asks, what kind of god would command, if a god commands you to burn a child, that god must be evil. And the strange thing is, Melisandre actually looks taken aback at that, or surprised at that, and she points out, we wouldn't be standing here without the red god. Jon Snow would not be alive without the red god. And she reminds Jon Snow, we still have a war to come. I have a part to play, otherwise the Red God would have dealt with me by now. So he kind of just takes this honorable but middle way of banishing her to the south and letting her know that if she ever tries to come back north, she will be hanged as a murderer. We also have a segue to Walder Frey and Jaime Lannister at the Twins, celebrating their victory over the Blackfish at Riverrun, or at least Walder Frey is celebrating, pouring wine and making toasts to how the Lannisters and the Freys send their regard. But you can see that Jaime has nothing but contempt for his supposed ally. He, just condescendingly, just with as a subtle insult asks Walder Frey, does he fight? And Walder Frey is like, I don't need to. The point is just victory over your enemies, and all my enemies, the Starks, the Tullys, they're all dead, so he wins. He doesn't have to fight. And he reminds Jaime that the only real battle Jaime's ever been in resulted in him being captured by Robb Stark. And this reminded me back in season 1 about how Ned Stark had pointed out that Jaime's armor barely had any scratches or dents or something. This isn't the first time Jaime has been called out for not really having done battle that much, basically. But Jaime has the last word here, talking about how people aren't scared of the Freys, they're scared of the Lannisters, and if the Lannisters have to keep doing what they just did, having to take back Riverrun for the Freys, then what do the Lannisters need the Freys for? Now, I was legitimately scared for Jaime by how he went at Walder Frey. Everyone knows that Walder Frey is a sensitive man who basically kills anyone he thinks is mocking him. But it turned out that I did not have to be scared for Jaime for very long, thanks to this young lady who is, drumroll, genuine surprise, Arya Stark, wearing the face of a pretty servant girl who serves Walder Frey his own sons in a pie. From the book Frey Pies, she serves him his own sons in a pie, removes the face, and lets him know that the last face he'll see before he dies is a Stark smiling down at him before she proceeds to slit his throat in the final reverse Red Wedding, in the final Justice for the Red Wedding. Sansa and Jon Snow had carried out part of the revenge by killing the Boltons, who were, of course, the players in the Red Wedding. And Arya had finished it off by handling the Freys. Now we go back north, and one thing they mentioned that was cool was that the fact that now they had received a white raven, there's a little white bird here in the picture, from the Citadel, meant that winter was officially here. So winter is here. Now Jon and Sansa have this conversation about why she didn't tell him about the Knights of the Vale. I had thought the last week that it had been about a strategy, a tactic. But it seems not. She just apologizes that she didn't tell him. And he gives her this speech about, they need to trust each other. They have so many enemies. And it seems as though she honestly might have been susceptible or influenced somewhat by Littlefinger's attempt at Molestown to push her and Jon apart by mentioning how she is a true-born child of Ned Stark, whereas he is a bastard. He mentions it again in this episode when they're in the Weirwood, mentioning how Jon Snow is a bastard born in the South, she was born in the North, she is not a bastard, and reminding her about, basically how he wants the North to rally behind her. And when you think about it, you start realizing how it's part of his grander plan. He had mentioned to Roose Bolton before about how the Knights of the Vale and the Warriors of the North had once united to take down a king. I mean, he was direct with Sansa about how his goal is to reach the Iron Throne with her at his side. He clearly wants to do it with that union of the Vale and the North, but it looks like that plan, which depends on Sansa being Wardeness rather than Jon Snow being Warden, is simply not going to happen. Um, or it's unraveling. He's being rejected. I mean, twice before, Sansa had let him kiss her at the Eyrie, in the crypts before he left her with the Boltons. This time, when he tries one more time, though, she just doesn't let him. Just gently, holds him off, and you can tell it is just utter rejection. Especially given what happens next. Jon is named King of the North. Uh, Lyanna Mormont leads the way with a rousing speech about how she doesn't care whether or not he's a bastard. He has Ned Stark's blood. He avenged, his family at the Red Wedding. He's a king to her, and everyone else joins in, declares him the White Wolf and King in the North. Everyone looks happy except they keep looking at Littlefinger, and how you can see how his plans are just falling apart. Some other people have noticed that Sansa had only a lukewarm response. There was definitely scenes that they cut between Sansa and Littlefinger. Why would Sansa have a lukewarm response? I firmly believe that in this episode she had accepted to allow Jon to be the head of the household now. I guess the Stark representative. Um, some people actually think no, she looked lukewarm. Maybe she will mind not, maybe she now has the appetite for power, and she minds a little that she's not gonna have it. I did not believe there was any way, shape, or form she could still be influenced by Littlefinger, but maybe this is just her on her own, wanting a bit of power, so her response isn't as enthusiastic as everyone else's. I don't know. What is clear, however, is that one of the avenues that Littlefinger planned to take to the throne have been blocked. But given that this is the man who started everything by getting Lysa Arryn to poison her husband, and setting all these events in motion, you bet that he's not going to just step aside. He's going to find another route to the throne. He did mention how it would eventually reach King's Landing, that he had declared strongly for House Stark by intervening in their war with the Boltons and helping them out. So he has no more allies in King's Landing. The Lannisters will not be his allies now. So one wonders, where will he go? He did promise Cersei Sansa's head on a spike, but I had always firmly believed that he loved Sansa too much to ever really do that. Even in this episode, he calls her my love at one point. But what will he do now that he has been completely rejected? What is going to happen? Even though it looks like things have come to like a stop for him in this episode, it makes me even more curious to know what he's going to do next. So, next we move on to the to Dorne, where the Queen of Thorns has been invited to meet with the Sand Snakes and Oberyn Martell's former consort. They offer her vengeance, they offer her justice, and this whole entire thing has been orchestrated by none other than Varys, who also offers her fire and blood. Basically, if you remember, he came back to Westeros at the beginning of the last episode to look for allies for Daenerys, and it looks like he's found them. One thing that I want to everyone to point out is the Queen of Thorns should be dead right now. If it hadn't been for that note from her granddaughter, she would without a doubt be dead right now. She would have attended her grandson's trial and been put on fire like everyone else. And if you remember, Cersei had encouraged her to stay. I'm not entirely sure yet if the plan for the wildfire had been set in motion, but if it had been, then Cersei was just, wasn't encouraging her to stay and fight. She was encouraging her to stay and, be killed. Back in season 2, Cersei had explained the story behind the song "The Rains of Castamere" to Marjorie Tyrell, about how the former second richest house in the Seven Kingdoms had tried to betray the richest house, the Lannisters, and her father, Tywin Lannister, had basically wiped them, killed them all, and completely erased them. And you just keep thinking that in this episode, Cersei came so close to having her own Reigns of Castamere moment, getting rid of all her enemies. And in a way, she did kind of win. The Queen of Thorns mentioned how she had no future now. Her descendants were dead. With her grandchildren and her son are dead. So you realize, the Tyrells will end with her. But the fact that she managed to escape means that this will probably cost Cersei very, very dearly. But Cersei came this close to just wiping out all her enemies, even her uncle, in just one fell swoop. Now, near the wall, Benjen leaves Mira and Bran. He mentions how he can't get past the wall because it is infused with magical spells that keep out the dead. A lot of people are wondering if the mark left by the Ice King on Bran's arm means that the White Walkers can pass the wall. Or I don't know what this means for Benjen. Does he not know about it, or does it mean it just doesn't work? I think it would be more dramatic if for some reason they need the wall to come down somehow. But anyway, Benjen has to leave them at this point, and this is also the point where Bran decides to finally finish his Tower of Joy vision. Now, one cool thing I noticed, or one thing that for some reason just struck me to note, was that this time, even though he didn't call out to his father looked back anyway as if he had heard something, right? And it just reminded you that what Bran did that last time was what had always happened now. Things Bran does become what had always happened in the past, even though he caused them. You already know that this phenomenon is significant as it applies to Hodor. It is significant as it applies to his interaction with the Night's King. A lot of people on the internet are wondering, is it's going to significantly apply to other things in history as well? Has Bran been causing other things all through history? I don't know, and there's some things that I don't buy. I don't think are true, like him whispering in the Mad King's ear, burn them all, and all these things. But the fact that they kind of showed this scene again made me think maybe it'll be significant to something else in history. We finally enter the Tower of Joy. We see Lyanna Stark on that famous bed of blood, and she whispers first something inaudible in Ned's ear, then more audibly she whispers, if Robert finds out about him, he'll kill him, you know it. Promise me you'll protect him, Ned. Promise me. And of course she's talking about baby Jon Snow. We finally know who Jon's mother is. It is Lyanna Stark, Ned Stark's younger sister. We now know that he is not the bastard son of Ned Stark at all. He is half Stark, half Targaryen. There's a lot of confusion that people have come to me with. Does this mean he is Dany's brother? No. Daenerys Targaryen is his aunt. His father was Daenerys Targaryen's older brother. Both Daenerys and Jon's father, Rhaegar Targaryen, were children of the Mad King. So Daenerys is his aunt. Given that Daenerys was born while her family was trying to flee, they are nonetheless around the same age. But she is his aunt. And some people have wondered, is he, because he was born to Lyanna Stark, is he Robert Baratheon's son? Absolutely not. It's because of Robert that Ned has to lie about Jon's parentage. Robert Baratheon is determined to kill every Targaryen, to slaughter every Targaryen. He already had Lannister men kill his. He already had people slaughtering Targaryen babies unapologetically. He had not apologized when the Mountain had bashed a baby's head against the wall, a Targaryen baby's head against the wall. So Robert is the reason Ned lies about Jon Snow, so that Robert doesn't try to have him killed. Ned doesn't even tell his own wife about it. He just lets everyone believe that it's his bastard son. The only person who knows is Mira's father, who was with him at the Tower of Joy and who is still alive, but who the show hasn't dealt with yet. So Ned is Daenerys' nephew, and he is half Targaryen and half Stark. How he'll find out, we don't know. We now know, of course, that a second person alive knows, and that is his brother Bran. We now go to when Jaime is returning to King's Landing. He sees it still on fire, and just the look on his face, devastation, concern. He arrives just in time to see his sister getting coronated. Somehow, Cersei has risen to the throne with no contest whatsoever. Since Myrcella died and since season 6 began, I have been wondering, who is Tommen's heir? This is a kid who has been prophesied to die, and no one is wondering who his heir is going to be, except maybe the High Sparrow, who was trying to convince Margaery to produce one. And now it seems like it doesn't even really matter. He dies, and his mother just assumes the throne. Cersei, House of Lannister. Note they don't call her House of Baratheon. First of her name, Queen of the Seven Kingdoms and the Andals and the whole thing. And you stop and think, who would have contested her? The great houses are all a mess. The Lannisters themselves right now don't have heirs, not even her cousin Lancel. The Baratheons, Stannis is gone, Shireen is gone. All that's left is Gendry, a bastard whose whereabout no one knows. Tully's Edmure is still in the dungeons of the Frey, of the Frey dungeons. Walder Frey confirmed that early this episode, so that's interesting. Now that Walder Frey is dead, are the Tullys back, or is he now officially just the Lannisters' prisoner? Dorian and Trystane Martell slaughtered. The great houses are basically just a mess. The North is run now by a bastard and a woman who seem to have no interest in the Iron Throne. There's just no one really to contest Cersei's ascension. The look her brother gives her when he arrives just... one doesn't even know what to call it. You can imagine what's just going through his mind. The thing she just did, blowing up a portion of the town with wildfire, is the thing he killed the Mad King for attempting to do, for planning to do. He stuck a knife in his back and he slit his throat to prevent the Mad King from doing what Cersei has just done. So this is the person he loves more than anyone in the world, and she has just done something that he would kill someone for. You immediately start thinking, will this make him eventually the Valonqar? I thought for sure if he arrived and saw what was happening and found Cersei in a more private interaction, that he might have killed her in a fit of emotion. But when he arrives, she is in the most invulnerable state she can be in, flanked by Kingsguards in a room full of people, getting crowned, and so he can't touch her. However, a lot of people seem to think that this was just like a big, powerful moment for Cersei. I found it oddly empty. She has almost nothing left. Her children are all dead. She has almost no allies. Arya just killed one of the last ones. Her father is gone. Her uncle is gone. Her cousin is gone. She has a crown. She has a great army. But she has lost almost everything. She's completely isolated. She and Jaime are always talking about how it wouldn't matter if they're the last two people on Earth. They would, burn cities down, whatever. They're all that matters. It's beginning to really look like they might be the last two people on Earth. They've lost almost everyone close to them. Of course, Tyrion is on his way, but they don't know that. So I actually just felt weird and empty and sad. Like, what does she intend for her legacy to be? She has almost nothing left. Is she going to legalize incest and produce more heirs with with Jamie? Is she going to marry someone and produce heirs with Jamie anyway, like in her last marriage? That legacy and that family that her father was always emphasizing. What is she going to do? Because right now, despite the crown, I just didn't feel anything. It's kind of like you remember the blood magic witch from the beginning, from season one, who killed Drogo, Khal Drogo. Like, what is the point of life if nothing is left? I saw Cersei in this crown, and I actually felt sorry for her because she has almost nothing left. And one wonders, what is her brother going to do? Is he ever going to forgive her for this? We'll wait and see in season 7. Finally, we get to Daenerys, who is about to set sail finally to Westeros with Theon and Yara Greyjoy, with her fleet of beautiful Targaryen ships, with Varys and Tyrion and Missandei. A lot of people were asking, did Varys teleport? Well, if they had time to paint all those ships and all those sails, then there must have been time for him to get back from Westeros. Tyrion, speaking of Tyrion, she had earlier named him Hand of the Queen in quite a touching and emotional interaction, and here he bended the knee. The person who isn't coming along is Daario, who she has left behind with the second sons to keep peace in Meereen. She mentioned how she would seek alliances in Westeros through marriage, and it would be inappropriate to have a lover. It was a sad departure. It was a sad separation, but he will not be coming along. But finally, she is setting sail for Westeros with her fleet of ships, her Dothraki, her Unsullied, and of course her 3 dragons. This is what has been building up since the very first season, and next season it looks like it is finally going to happen. So, looking forward to that very much. It has been a great season, and there will be so much more to discuss. It'll be a long wait, but the great thing about Game of Thrones is that there's virtually endless things to continue discussing until then, which I hope you'll be able to join me for, and I hope will be enjoyable. Thank you.